How you doing, everybody? And we have a doozy of a patch today. I have a lot of opinions. And we're going to be going through them with these changes. So grab some popcorn, honestly, because this one's going to be long. But yeah, let's get started with this. All right, let's get started. So a lot of interesting changes here in this particular patch. Definitely have opinions on them. Let's get into it. So first one we do have is Mobius and Mobius. So this one's pretty drastic in my opinion. So what's happening is that it's going from an ongoing to an on reveal where it was ongoing permanent effect. You play it on turn 2, you get the effect for the rest of the game, where your cards cost cannot be increased, your opponent's cards cost cannot be reduced, right? So just a permanent thing you play down, you set, forget it, it does its job. Now it's an on reveal. So it's also until the end of your next turn, your cost cannot be increased and your opponent's cost cannot be reduced. So instead of it lasting from like turn 2 to turn 6, now, if you played on turn 2, it'll last turn 3, essentially. You played on turn 3, it'll last turn 4. Play on turn 4, it'll last turn 5. That is significantly worse. I don't know if there's a way of saying it. Like, this is a huge nerf. And honestly, I think it's too much. I think it's going to be really hard to justify playing this card at all. Just the barrier of execution to really make this do anything is so much higher. You have to basically know exactly what your opponent is going to do when they're going to do it. Like, just generically, right, what this was really in the game or really making worse but still playable was Loki decks, right? Loki decks really did not like facing this card. This was like your main avenue to deal with the Loki deck. And they did nerf Loki, but honestly, I still see Loki. It still feels very strong, even with Mobius before. And now if you want to deal with Loki, you have to play it the exact same turn they play Loki, right? Like if they, and the thing is, people can still play Zabu and then Loki on 3, right? So if that happens, there's no way you're going to be really expecting them to do that. So they still will have a window. They're always going to have a window to kind of abuse their Loki discount, right? There's no way they're not going to be able to. Even if they play Loki on 4, right? You play Mobius on 4, then okay, turn 5 they can't do it. Turn 6 they can. They can just do it turn 6, right? So like there's no this card is kind of dead in my eyes. Obviously, I could be wrong, and this could still do something, but I just don't think that it's going to make a lot of sense to put this like RNG level card now into your deck and just hope it counters Loki decks or counters Ravonna decks. We're going to talk about that, or Zabu decks or anything like that. Like, it's just too limiting, too weak. I feel if they were gonna do something like this, make it last 2 turns. That would be the minimum. The minimum, I would say, make it last 2 turns. So at least if you play this turn 4, you get turn 5, turn 6 disabled. That's something that's useful, right? If you play this turn 2 like normal, turn 3, turn 4 disabled, like into Ravonna, that might be something. It's still definitely a lot worse. I don't know. I do understand that this card was too strong. I'm obviously trying to think about it from their point of view, right? Like this card came out, negative decks were dead. Zabu decks were kind of not being played as much. Loki decks were a little bit weak, but Loki decks are broken, and Loki still needs a nerf. Like it should have been a 4-3. I'm I do not think this card is healthy at all. At least in high level. I think like if you're not in high level matches, it's kind of fine, but definitely it's a toxic card. At the top of the leaderboards, the people that play it are just very strong. They know what you're doing. They know how to use your decks against you. It's just very, very powerful. So it's hard to really have sympathy for Loki. The card, I mean, I played as well sometimes, so I understand. Like it's just a good card. Um, but the way this nerf is, and this nerf also makes me want to talk about the act of planning, right? With spotlights, the act of planning with your tokens and stuff, and your bundles, right? Because this had a bundle. It's really hard to justify the planning, right? It's hard to fully say, hey, because let's look at all the cards in September, right? We had Loki come out as a season pass, whatever. We've got Alioth come out. We had Ravonna come out, and we've had Mobius also come out, right? All these cards have gotten changed. They've all been adjusted, right? Um, Loki got nerfed. Mobius is getting nerfed here. Ravonna's getting buffed, but we haven't talked about it yet. And then Alioth got nerfed, right? And when the season came out, you saw the cards. It was like, okay, you have to get Alioth. You have to get Mobius. Ravonna, you can skip. Loki season pass was busted. You should get it, right? And Loki still kind of busted, honestly. Like, this was great. But honestly, Alioth and Mobius, if they stay the same ability, they don't change anymore. Like, it's really going to be like these cards now aren't that crazy. While it might be Ravonna being the best card of the three to get. And there's no way you can say, hey, you look at the cards in September and say, oh, skip Mobius, skip Alioth, get Ravonna. That's the one that's gonna get buffed. And the other two are gonna get nerfed because they're too strong. So get Ravonna, because eventually that's gonna be the best card. Like, that's not a feasible game plan you can tell anyone to plan for or to expect, really. Like, maybe moving forward you can kind of have that mindset in the back of your head, but like generally that is not something that you should go out there and say, hey, this is the game plan. Get the weakest card because they're going to buff it. Skip the strong cards. The cards are obviously strong because they're going to get nerfed. People are going to play it. Like, that's not really feasible. And that's not, how do you plan for that? How do you justify any game plan going into a month saying, hey, these cards are strong, I guess I should skip them, or anything like that? Like, it doesn't make sense. So just the way the balance is done, for it to be like, with the ability to change things on the fly, to change cards ability on the fly, and the way that resources are so limited, where you can only get like a specific, you only get one card through the spotlights per month, right? Or so. It's really hard to be very confident that, hey, this is going to be the right choice, because in the future it could get changed. So that's definitely something to talk about, maybe a video I want to present, but it's just weird. And I personally don't love this change. I already think Loki is very strong, right? And with this change, like, what counters Loki? Like, what do you really do? And there's even more changes that are more beneficial to Loki as well, right? That we're going to talk about. So it's just it's an understandable change from the notion of this card kills too many archetypes, and it's true, right? Like, this card kills a lot of archetypes, but the archetypes are still very strong, and some of those archetypes don't have counterplay. So how do you deal with those archetypes without counterplay? And Mobius, in its current form, I don't think is strong enough counterplay to really want to put in your deck, right? So that's the kind of issue, right? Like, look at Killmonger, right? Killmonger is such a crazy card, in my opinion. It's such a crazy kill all one drops. Who they all die. It doesn't matter what lane. They all dead. And it doesn't see like insane amounts of play, right? Like, considering what it does, but that card hasn't been changed, has been touched because it's kind of necessary to deal with some matchups, to deal with some game plans, and yeah, maybe this was too strong. Maybe ongoing permanent is too strong, but definitely one turn of activation is too weak, right? It needs to be a little bit more. I think 2 turns is like the minimum, and then you go from there, right? Like that would be my consideration. So this is a long one, but I think it's important to discuss the card in essence and what it does and what this changes, right? Because I do think with this now out of the picture, really, you're gonna be able to play more things like negative. You're gonna be able to play more things like Loki. I mean, Loki's already played Zabu, Ravonna. A lot of new or older decks. Death is playable again. She-Hulk is very playable again, right? So there's so many more archetypes that are playing, which is why I can see why they just didn't like that. Hey, because this card is like so oppressive, all these cards are dead, right? All these archetypes are dead. I understand that, but this is like you're killing the card off, right? Like this is not playable in a reasonable sense. Like it's hard to justify because even in best case scenarios, right? Like the standard you have to be thinking about right now is Loki. Even if you try to play this into Loki, it doesn't work at all. So I definitely go back to the drawing board. I make some adjustments. That's my thoughts on this particular card. But let's move on. Let's talk about what they have to say anyways, right? We haven't even said that. So Mobius has had a massive impact on the metagame, which is true, forcing a changing of the guard among top decks that are perennial powerhouses like Zabu, Sarah, and Death. Sarah as well. I didn't even talk about Sarah at all. Yeah, fall from grace in favor of decks that could push power by just playing cards for the normal energy cost, which is fine. Like I think it's okay. Like those cards have been crazy good forever, and them having some answers is fine, right? The thing about moves is like even if you have in your deck, you're not getting it every time on the perfect curve, right? Sometimes it's just awkward if you draw like turn 4, right? It's not like you can just say, "Oh, I'm not going to play my 4 drop." You still have to do stuff. So I think it was okay to just have it in there, even though it did make cards like Sarah and Death like really hard to play. So I do see where they're coming from. While we were eager to see the world Mobius were created, we expected to make an adjustment down the road in order to welcome cost reduction strategies back into the sunlight. Yeah, I mean this isn't an adjustment. This is a destruction of the card. Today is that day we're shifting Mobius from a temporary counter that requires good timing, but it requires insane timing and it doesn't always work. Even if you play the card perfectly, you're still not going to have it really work in your favor. Right? Like let's say you play Ravonna on 2, right? Do you want to play Mobius on 2 just in case they play Ravonna on 2? Not really. They play Ravonna, right? Then they get to do something on 3, right? You don't get an effect, right? You're not playing they get to do their something. Do you play it on 3 to kind of mess their turn 4? Like, hey, they can't play Iron Man on 4 or something like that. Like it's like it's not that great. Let's say you do it on 4. Well then okay, they can play their Iron Man combo on 6, right? They could go Iron Man Mystique on 6. So it's like you still didn't really stop them. Right? So like you're not countering them. I know I'm still going off. Maybe that I'm just thinking I don't love this change. Anyways, let me get through this. Well, this makes him trigger to set aside energy for kind of like Shadow King. It's not like Shadow King though, and also opens up counters like Magic for decks that are hyper vulnerable to Mobius. Yeah, so Magic destroys Mobius at all, like completely, which was interesting because Mobius kind of destroyed Magic before, where a lot of times you wanted to do like Infinite She-Hulk stuff or anything like that. Now you don't really care since it only lasts for 1 turn. We're very also interested to hear your feedback on our approach here, using a new card to create a new play environment temporarily. That's an interesting sentence. Using a new card as a tool to create a play environment temporarily, which means that they're saying we're gonna release a broken card and then nerf it, right? Isn't that what they're saying? You get a new play environment because the card is broken, then we nerf it. So because to make it temporary, I don't think I don't think that's like a great approach. It's just like making sure the balance is good from the get go. Now that is an impossible ask, in my opinion. Like it's so hard to really fully grasp how a card will function in the live service, even if you have playtesting and stuff like that. Sometimes it's just hard to fully know, unless you have like really detailed. But that's that's a lot of work, right? So, um, but even then, right? Like making sure that the card doesn't go from oppressive to unplayable is sometimes hard, right? And we've definitely had those moments with older or other cards that were oppressive, and then they get nerfed, and then they're like close to very weak. Um, but they're definitely interested to hear your feedback. Obviously, you can hear my feedback in this video already. But I just think maybe you just have to be more accurate with the either the initial release, or just make sure these adjustments are still usable, right? Like still in the right vein of playable, still in the right vein of like a very usable strong card. So my initial assessment is I'm not in love with this change. I don't like it. I think you kill off the card, and especially for people that spend their resources on this card, if they see, oh, now this card isn't very usable, it might just not have a good effect. So especially for people who like bought the bundle and stuff like that, right? Because that means they got 2 weeks less of playtime with the card before, while it was very strong, right? Which is something I was afraid of. But yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see, right? I haven't played with the new change. This is just my gut reaction, but that's my current thoughts on it. Maybe it'll change with time, but yeah, we'll move on because there's more. This is gonna be a long video. Oh man. All right. Next up, we have Ravonna actually getting the buff. I would say this is a buff that we talked about. So this is something that they kind of hidden it initially. When the card was released, there was definitely some asks about like, hey, what happens if this card just doesn't do well, doesn't perform well, isn't being played? Will they go and look into it? Will they make it cheaper? They mentioned like that is something they were considering, making the card cheaper if it just didn't have good stats. And it looks like obviously it didn't have good stats. I barely saw this card at all. So yeah, I think this was to be expected. It's just interesting because it's being released with the Mobius change, which that in itself already makes this better. But now, like that's something they do a lot, where they double dip on buffs, where they change a card that was like limiting another card, and on the same patch they also buff the card that was being limited. So what happens is like, oh wow, this card is now insane. The weakness is gone, plus it's even better, right? Like, so I definitely think that could happen with this, where it's just gonna be a lot better to play decks that can synergize with Ravonna, right? It's another Zabu, right? That's what it is. It's just another Zabu, but with more play patterns. Honestly, right? Zabu has less play patterns, I think, than Ravonna, but yeah, it's another Zabu, so this is definitely something you can see. And I think making cards cheaper is just one of the strongest effects in the game. Like, just period. Making cards cheaper is just like so like cards are supposed to be on particular power curves, right? Because they're that strong. And when you make it cheaper, at the you like you're so cards like Ravonna, cards like Zabu, cards like even Psylocke, right? You're paying essentially 1 to 2 power, right? Because a lot of cards are 2 3s, right? There's not a lot of 2 4s in the game right now. There's just 2 3s, right? So you're paying 1 or 2 power to get a card, a mana cheaper. Sometimes multiple cards mana cheaper. That's way more effective than 1 power or 1 or 2 power. That's way stronger than 1 or 2 power. So these cards just always end up being very strong. So um, could definitely see this one, and things like Zabu, things like Psylocke, right? Like they usually trigger once or twice a game, right? This you can trigger every turn easily. Like I could play a 4 for 3, I could play a 5 for 4, I could play multiple 3s for 2. Like I could play a 2 for 1, right? Like you could definitely trigger this lots of times. So this one's ceiling is way higher than some of the other mana reductions or mana cheaper cost savers we have. So the potential for this is high. It's just like it was held back, right? Like because you couldn't really play with Mobius, honestly. Like it just didn't work. It was expensive as well, right? You had to play this on 3, and then it was like then you have 3 turns to do it. Now you play this on 2, and you have 4 turns to take advantage of it. That's so many turns. So yeah, crazy buff for sure. We'll have to see if how this meta changes, right? Like already these are crazy changes so far. We've only talked about 2 cards, and I'm already would tell you the meta is very different. But there's more. There's more, guys. But yeah, let's see what they have to say about this. Ravonna released on the weak side, which is true, and Mobius released immediately afterwards. Put pressure, that's true. This is the sort of adjustment we'd normally be happy to make via an OTA, but we waited until this patch because of Mobius. So they're waiting until Mobius to kind of add this on top. While Mobius was ongoing, Ravonna's buffs wouldn't be as impactful as we like, so we're hoping this change and its timing gives her an opportunity to succeed. I do think she'll be playable. I wouldn't be scared about that. We did decide to keep her stats just under cost reduction Hall of Famer Zabu, but while Ravonna is more restrictive, I think Ravonna is less restrictive than Zabu, personally. I don't know if I agree with that. She can also affect a wider range of powerful cards. Enabling turn 5 Armanzil is a little bit scarier than I mean I think Ravonna is less restrictive than Zabu, so I don't agree with that one in particular. So yeah, this she should be very playable now. She should be very strong. Definitely should be new decks being created because of her existence in this particular range. So this was one of the cards I was excited to see in September do well. Well, create new decks. Maybe not do well, but create new decks. So wondering what type of decks will be created with this card. So yeah, definitely interesting one. You can also play her with Darkhawk. I just like, you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, it's definitely a world where you're getting turn 3, like 2 mana Darkhawks, right? I could see that actually. That's so scary. All right, let's move on. Wave is getting a change. So it used to be on reveal, all cards cost 4 until the end of next turn. Now it's all cards cost a maximum of 4 until the end of next turn. So this is a huge change. Wave, as you know it, is dead for sure. Like, so what's going on is that you don't have the the cost increasing effect anymore. So there's no cost increasing measures on top of this card. That's not its use case now. It's just you play this on 3, you play a powerful card on 4. That's its use case. That's all it does now. Well, that's not all it does, but that's its main function. So you can't really use this to kind of prevent people from like flooding on turn 6, anything like that. All those abilities are gone. So it's just a different card. It's just a completely different card where instead of using it to kind of mess with your opponent as like a counterplay tool, it's now just a ramp tool. It's just another ramp card, essentially. That's really what it does now. So it's a completely different card, essentially. I guess they were just not happy with how powerful it was for limiting. It was always weird that Wave and Sandman, you'd rather just have a Wave anytime instead of a Sandman. You just rather have the Wave because the Wave does exactly what Sandman does, and it's better a lot of the times. It's cheaper, it's better. They both play on 5. Like, it was just like so weird to me. So I don't know, honestly. I liked Wave being able to shut down Flood. I did like that. But now it means that it's really only Sandman that does that now. Are there other cards that can shut down flooding? There has to be more, but it's really only, I would say only Sandman. This meta is gonna be so weird, honestly. It's gonna be such a weird meta coming up. Let's see what they have to say. This is a change we've been sitting on for a while, but we didn't want to do such a shakeup of the meta during a time where Wave was an important tool, balanced tool for managing specific matchups. Yeah, Wave was very important. However, the combination of Loki, Mobius, and Alioth have all led to Wave seeing play in more decks than just ones looking to slow the game down and play big cards. We're seeing a lot more decks get ahead than use Wave to slam the door. I mean, that's the way she's always been used, I think, by high level players. So it's interesting. Maybe that's just becoming more common throughout the board, so they're seeing it in their data, but that's just always the way Wave was being used. Since that's explicitly not what we want for Wave, oh, that's interesting. So they don't like that Wave being used turn 5 to shut down turn 6 plays. They don't like that. Huh. That's something I did not know. I thought there was just like something they were okay with. Wave will no longer increase card costs at all. So no longer will it ever increase a card cost with this change. Just reduce cards that cost 5 or more to a maximum of 4. So there's definitely some questions, I would say, about how it works, where the old Wave effect would make everything cost 4, and then there would be a reduction, right? So if you were playing like She-Hulk, if you're playing Death, it would cost 4 as a base, and any reduction would be tacked on. I think the way it's worded is a little different, where what happens is anything that costs 5 or more is now just put to 4. Where it's, so let's say you have She-Hulk, right? She-Hulk costs 6 or whatever. If you passed with Wave, right? So you played Wave on 5. What happened was She-Hulk would start at 4 and then go down to 2. Right? I'm thinking what happens here is She-Hulk will be at 6, it'll go down to 4, and then it'll say, oh, it's a 4. 4 is the max, so it's just gonna start at 4. Whereas let's say you play Wave on and a 2-drop, right? So She-Hulk will be a 6 and be like, oh, you're a 6, you're going to be a 4. So it's not gonna be the same. I'm assuming, this could be wrong. It's not gonna be the same where if you play just Wave on 5, you'll get a 2-power She-Hulk. It looks like you'll get a 4-power She-Hulk with the way it's worded. Same thing with like Death, right? So you'd have to kill a lot of minions for Death to be under 4. It's not like you're gonna start at 4 and then go to 0 pretty much instantaneously or anything like that. So it should be more balanced in that aspect. But you do not get to use Wave to lock down a lane, or a game or their opponent's cards. So definitely it stops being like a better Sandman, and now it's like just a ramp tool essentially. This change is certainly a nerf into Wave in some strategies. Definitely high level player strategies. That Wave was mostly used to stop people from doing stuff on 6. We'll look at their performance to evaluate future buffs. I'm not sure. I like the option of being able to Wave to stop people from doing like huge flood turns. There's not a lot of good answers to huge flooding, honestly. Wave was one of them. Right, like if they played Sarah into like Hidden Monkey turn 6, right? What did you do? Like, right, it was either Wave or Sandman. Or Killmonger if you had priority, or like you can technically also do Shadow King, but that's specifically Hid Monkey decks. Like other flood decks aren't necessarily weak to either Killmonger or Shadow King. So it's not all flood decks that are like, oh, you always play this. So Wave you could always play. So I don't know. It's this one I'm not sure about, right? This one I'm not. There's no like visceral, oh my god. This one we'll have to see. I just worry about the strength of flood decks without an extra counter tool with it, right? Like Sandman already is not that popular of a card. It's very very expensive and very low base power. We are gonna talk about Sandman because they did buff it, and I'm happy about that. But um, it is interesting to see like a because usually Sandman decks are kind of telegraphed, right? It's like Electro decks into Sandman or something like that. So it's interesting to have less of those answers. But yeah, I mean, you'll know if they're playing Sandman usually. So yeah. Speaking of Sandman, right? So this is a change I'm happy about. This is the first change. Well, Ravonna change was okay, but I'm not sure. Like that could be a broken card, so I'm not sure. I'm like, oh, this is a balance change. This one I think is a balance change. So Sandman, I've been wanting to get buffed forever. I think as a 5/3, it just didn't make sense, especially with Old Wave, where Old Wave was a 3/3, right? And you could play Wave or Sandman, and then Wave was just way better in every case. Like there was really no reason to ever play Wave. Well, especially unless you're playing Electro over just a Wave and a 2-drop or anything like that. So I think this making a 5/4 is definitely a lot better. They went from a 5/5 to a 5/3, and I think that was just too heavy-handed at once. Maybe they just didn't like how prevalent that Sandman was as a 5/5. But I mean, 5/5 is a pretty good seller, especially with Electro. So that wasn't too surprising. So but yeah, I think 5/4 is definitely a lot better. This is something I've been asking for personally. So happy to see it. Yeah, I don't think this is gonna like make Sandman crazy. It just makes it a little bit better to play Sandman decks, and especially with them removing Wave essentially. Like Wave isn't a control tool anymore. It's nice to give Sandman players a little bit of a bump. So I'm okay with this. With Wave no longer function as a cost reduction, Mobius getting weaker, we'd like to give Sandman a buff in order to ensure he remains a relevant tool for countering decks. Yeah, are you gonna have to play Sandman to deal with Loki? Oh, that's true, right? Because that is an answer to Loki. You can play Sandman, right? And I do think Loki is crazy good. So that's definitely something to consider. In this current meta, because you're gonna have Ravonna, you're gonna have Zabu back, you're gonna have Negative back, right? Like maybe Sandman is just the meta to be playing right now since Mobius is gone. Like honestly, so you need to have some way to deal with these high flood decks, right? Like there's how do you deal with Sarah? How do you deal with everything really? So yeah, definitely I can see a return of Sandman. And you know what's gonna be sad? Sandman's gonna get a huge jump in play rate, and it's gonna be like, oh wow, Sandman's too good. Let's nerf it again. And I'm just like, no, no, that's not it. You know, you've just created a meta where everything is flood. So like, why wouldn't we play Sandman? But yeah, this is definitely in essence, it's a good change. It's just that the meta I feel is going to be weird. That's going to make this feel maybe more impactful than it is. But yeah, but then again, like Sandman is a niche card, so it just might not see that much play. You know, maybe you're watching this video, you guys get like, oh, this is the strat. But yeah, definitely an interesting change overall meta wise. Apart from Sandman, I do like the Sandman change. So yeah. This is the type of change we usually make in an OTA, but we prefer to accompany Waves change. Sure. All right, next up we have Negasonic Teenage Warhead. I knew this was coming, guys. I knew this was coming because it was in the spotlight. Just like I'm pretty sure they saw the success of Snowguard, like buffing Snowguard before it's in the spotlight, and they're like, oh, we gotta do that for Negasonic. We have to make sure Negasonic is so strong so that people will get the spotlight. You know, I'm sure they look at their data, they're like, oh my god, a lot of people bought that Alioth spotlight, and that was because they wanted Snowguard, you know, and then they nerfed Snowguard afterwards, and then people aren't they aren't complaining that much about the Snow Guard nerf or anything like that, right? But they still got all the sales. They still got all the people buying the Alioth. So I'm pretty sure like they liked that game plan and they're doing it for Negasonic. So as soon as I saw Negasonic in that set, right, November 8th spotlight, I was like, they're gonna be buffing Negasonic before that, right? So not surprised at all to see this. This is just something I was honestly expecting. But yeah, this change though is crazy in my opinion. So they've changed it from after any card is played here, destroy this card and that card, into after an enemy card is played here, destroy it once per game. Now, I have some questions. Is this card getting destroyed or not? Right? Like, is this card not getting destroyed? Because if it's not getting destroyed, that's so crazy, right? You get a 3/2 plus you destroy your opponent's card. Because it says after an enemy card is played here, destroy it, right? It doesn't say destroy it and this card. So this card is surviving. Like, that is an insanely powerful swing. So I don't know, like, that's so good, right? And it gives you like if this card is like even if let's say even if you destroy this card as well, like this card is still very good. Like even if this card gets destroyed, yeah, you lose 2 power, but the potential to just win the game with proper plays of this is so high that you have to like respect that. So there is a world where this game becomes way more complicated. There is a world because everyone is running this. There is definitely a world where this card just shuts down like huge turn 5 plays, huge turn 6 plays, and everyone respects this card and plays it. And then the game is just infinitely more complicated because you have to be thinking about you playing with this and you playing around this every game, right? Like, so I don't know if that's something they're considering at all. I assume they're not, honestly. But yeah, this card could be crazy, right? This like even if it destroys itself, it's still crazy. This card is crazy, right? And I do wonder how they're going to adjust to the new meta, right? Because there's definitely a new meta coming with all these changes. So I really wonder. I don't have this card, right? I don't have this card right now, and I would consider getting this card for sure if I lose to this a lot. Well, if I just have to see it in action. I don't even have to lose to it a lot. I just have to see it like twice, and then I'm like, okay, I've seen enough, right? So the world could be different, like in terms of the ecosystem of Marvel Snap, if this card does work in a reasonable way where, let's say your opponent plays Shuri, right? Like, hey, and you have you're gonna have priority most of the time because they're playing a 2 power on 4, right? They play Shuri, you have priority. It's not an armor lane. Well, like hello, my friend. Have I introduced Negasonic? Destroy your Red Skull. Destroy your vision. You don't care, right? Like that is some very powerful tech. Even like, let's say they get to play their Red Skull, right? You get that 50-50 free win, 50-50 target their Taskmaster. Like that is some very powerful combo. Same thing. Let's talk about some other scenarios that are insane. They set up for Hulk, right? Evolved Hulk, High Evolutionary Hulk. You're just like, hey, hello. Have you seen my friend Teenage Warhead? Like, and you just destroy their 20 power Hulk. Like, there's so many scenarios that could just be very powerful, very Alioth-esque, but maybe less demanding, right? Like, you can do this and do other things, right? Like, so The potential for this card to be very toxic is high, and it's so cheap that I could definitely see this being a staple in lots of decks if this does function in the way it's worded, especially if it doesn't destroy itself. Then it's a 3/2 Shang-Chi, right? Like, in a lot of cases, that's so good. You know? Like, oh man. So yeah, I don't know about this patch, chat. But yeah, we're already nearing 40 minutes and I'm not done, right? So you can tell, like, I have a lot of opinions here. But yeah, definitely an interesting adjustment. I knew adjustment to Warhead was coming. Did not know it'd be like this. This is a very, very powerful adjustment here. So we'll have to see what it ends up being, how it ends up affecting the metagame. But yeah, definitely some crazy changes we've seen so far. Oh, right. We have comments, right? Negasonic is language. Yeah, Negasonic has been one of the worst cards for a while. We've seen glimmers of experimentation. Yeah, people would experiment with playing Negasonic into the 5/6. What's that card called? Nimrod. Negasonic into Nimrod, right? But that's like, they only do that because there's nothing else to do with this card, and it's not that good of a play, right? People don't play Nimrod anymore. Do that with Nimrod anymore, right? They do Shuri Nimrod, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just like there's no real good way of playing this card. More concerning for them, right? She even turned out to be a bit complicated even for casual play. Yeah, because to really play this well, you have to have a really high level grasp of the game to play this card well in its current state. And even then, it's like, even with that, it's still like questionable. So yeah, the biggest hurdle there is the card both restricts your own play, true, and blows itself up. Yeah, for sure. So now it doesn't do either of those things. Oh, it doesn't do either. So it does not blow itself up. So it is a 3/2 Shang-Chi. Damn, that's crazy. Oh man, that is so strong. All right, to compensate for this newfound strength, when it comes to fighting over cramped location on turn 6, we reduced her power a fair bit. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be getting this card probably, like either on November 8th or even earlier if I just don't want to wait. But yeah, this is definitely a crazy card, I would say, with the changes. So definitely going to be looking for this for sure. Seems really, really strong. So we got some new metas. We've got some new metas coming soon now. All right. And then the last two changes are they're not as crazy as the ones we just had. So Ant-Man is now being able to play on Space Stone, essentially. So if your side is full, you gain +3 power. Usually that only matters with Space Stone. There isn't that many locations that restrict more than one, right? It's just Space Stone. Surprising that there isn't like you can only play 2 cards in this location or anything like that. I feel like that is something that should be in there, but yeah, that's fine. Not a big change compared to everything else. And then we have Alioth. So Alioth's change now doesn't kill hobgoblins. That's the easiest way of explaining this change. So normally it would kill everything that got played this turn. Now it only destroys cards that are still on your opponent's side. So basically hobgoblin. Cards that move still get destroyed. So if you move a card in that lane, it will still be destroyed. So that's not changing. It's just cards going to your side or your opponent's side. Things like Hobgoblin, Green Goblin, those cards. Titania. But yeah, Titania, like those cards will not be destroyed, but everything else will. So yeah, definitely not the most impactful change, honestly. Allied still played somewhat. It's not as played as before, but it's still being played, especially in like move decks. Really take advantage of it since you can kind of move the power where you want. But overall, it's not crazy. So yeah, definitely definitely not as important as the other first four. So yeah, those are the changes we have here. This changes the functional adjustment to Alioth to get in line with how it interacts with control changing effects like Hobgoblin. Before, if your opponent played Hobgoblin, Alioth would destroy Hobgoblin even though it's on your side. Now, it won't. So yeah, not the biggest change in my opinion. Just a change to. It makes Alioth worse, I guess. Like that's all it does, right? Like now, if your opponent plays Hobgoblin and then you play Alioth, like normally you'd kill the Hobgoblin and you'd still be ahead. Now you're not, so you know that's very niche. It's really not the most important thing for Alioth. But yeah, definitely these first couple of changes are very, very impactful. I've talked a lot, so I'm not going to go crazy, right? But not a big fan of Mobius. Ravonna, I'm okay, but worried that it might be very strong. Wave, I have no opinions. I don't know yet how this really impacts the game, so I'm gonna hold off. Sandman I like, of course. And the Negasonic I'm super scared about. I think this card, if it will get changed. Honestly, it's gonna get changed. And even then, it could be so prevalent that you see it in every deck. That's my guess. Like it's that playable. So yeah. But yeah. That's my thoughts on the patch. A lot longer than I thought it'd be. Let me tell you, this was not my expectations. But yeah, what's your thoughts on these changes? You like them? You don't like them? Which ones you like? Which ones you don't like? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Educated calling snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you to marvel snap. Your skills will be improving. How you do